Good day. This is Red Hawk, and I'm coming to you from the deep end. You know, I used to carry these little earths in my pocket, little earth marbles. And the one thing I would do over and over is I would ask people, what is reality? I mean, I asked way over 1,000 people what is reality. Regrettably, the number one answer is whatever you want it to be. And my second question was, the North Korean who's starving or the woman in Africa who's starving, they're choosing that? And that's where it gets messy. What is reality? How do we know what is reality? And here at the deep end, what we've tried to do is take a journey to look at the things and processes that life cannot do without, that allowed life to happen. We've kind of been on this journey of wonder. We've talked about the beginning of being and the universe, and how through these three essential processes, complexification, differentiation, and semi-permeability, that being itself, something happened 4 billion years ago, and it became alive, life. And then using the same three essential processes over eons of time, life itself became aware of itself. A new form of consciousness emerged, and that's us human beings. And now we want to know our story. We want to know how this whole thing happened and what are the parameters that allow it to happen. So through science and paleontology, evolutionary biology, and a whole slew of other, relative sciences, we can begin to see that over the last 4 billion years, certain discernible rules made themselves known in nature. And when we look back, we can see those rules at play and how they created each aspect of the evolution of life all the way to consciousness. Now, there's a new series, I don't usually pitch shows, but on Netflix called Life on Our Planet with Morgan Freeman. Now, there's a couple Life on Our Planet, so go to the one with Morgan Freeman. And the series follows not just the evolution of life on our planet Earth, but how the development occurred. And how the series tries to identify 3 rules that seem to be rooted in reality. So for me, these 3 rules, when I think about reality, well, these are a component of them. What are the rules? 1, those that adapt win through. Think about it. Those that adapt win through. 2, competition drives evolution. And 3, the earth never stays the same. You can think of these as adaptability and evolution, competition, and mass extinctions. There's been 5 mass extinctions on the planet. Those are really interesting to look at. As I do my study, it's like one thread seems to go to the next, and it gets so big, and I go, damn, we only got a half hour. How are we going to even pull this together? So how do these 3 rules, evolution, competition, and mass extinctions, the adaptability, competition, and things moving and changing all the time, how do these rules apply today to our human lives? And how can we see these rules in some spiritual terms? Because I think our spirituality, if we look at it, plays into all of this. Think about the first one, evolution and adaptability. Think about the spiritual lessons that you learn about resilience, flexibility, not holding on, being here now. All of that is about our meeting the moment where it is and what is truly an honesty. Competition. Now, I have to say the competition thing, I like sports. But when I look through history and I see that war, defense, and security are 3 of the greatest innovators in human history, I see how competition drives evolution. Whether it's the internet, whether it's TV, all of these things were built on what I call the triumvirate of innovation. Universities, government, and business. It's amazing. And when war happens, boy, do they get together to do some new stuff. Amazing. We wouldn't have gone to the moon without Werner von Braun, who was the guy who designed the buzz bombs for Hitler. You see, it's all connected how these things work. And the third one, come on, Earth changes. Earth changes. The 5 extinctions, climate change, volcanoes, wildfires, changing, shifting, plates on the planet. And when you look at all the Earth changes, we get back to the first one of adaptability. Is the human species going to be able to adapt? That's a good question. Lord knows, I think there's a movement to adapt. And I have to say, given the 3 rules from our paleontologist friends, how can we live inside of them and continue to grow, develop, and evolve as the most powerful predatory species the planet has ever seen without destroying ourselves or the earth in the process? Is it possible? What are the spiritual pieces that need to happen that can come out of these rules that we can begin to grow a little bit more? And on that note, I'm going to turn it over to, I'm going to go with you first, Bob. Bob Hayes is coming from Florida. Marianne Rudis is coming to us from Spokane Valley, and I am in Spokane proper in Washington State. So, Bob, what say ye in the 3 rules, and how do we apply them today, and what can they show us?
Well, I don't think we have any choice, but we have to apply them because they were here before us, and they'll probably be here long after us. When you get to rules like that, that's the universe telling us this is the way it is. It's like, gravity is going to be here, and it doesn't matter what we think about gravity. If we jump off a cliff, we're going to fall down. And if we're not able to adapt, then we're going to fall by the wayside, as many other species have throughout recorded history and pre-recorded history. So part of the whole scientific enterprise is trying to figure out these rules and figure out how they work in the ever-changing universe around us. So, yeah, I think that as we've discussed many times in the sense of systems theory, these boundaries that exist shape us, but they also support us. And if we can learn to live within the boundaries, then they become more groundwork, more foundation for how we develop our lives. As long as we're fighting against them, we're really fighting against ourselves as part of the universe.
Amen. Marianne?
Well, yes, we do fight against ourselves, don't we? We kind of, I think those 3 things. So those that adapt win, right? Everything is changing. Everything is constantly moving forward, and ideas and thoughts are. Look at the technology that just over the last 100 years, the way technology has changed, and so we as human beings have to learn to adapt to this. We have to learn to live our lives differently. AI is on the rise. And so how does that integrate and fit into who we are? And the idea of competition, building, fueling evolution, we have to learn new ways to compete. War, killing somebody on a battlefield was one thing. Right now, the way wars are fought, you don't kill on a battlefield. It affects the whole world. And if we've got the capability now of creating mass extinction events. It's in our hands. And so if we don't learn new ways to drive evolution without killing each other, then we're not going to make it. And the idea that nothing stays the same, I mean, that's, we know that from one moment to the next. Things change, and they change rapidly. And I think that as a species, we really need to be able to, and the things that we talk about on the deep end, I think we really need to be able to adapt to those changes. And, there are people who want to go backwards and want to resist and fight that. And these evolutionary processes tell us they're not going to survive. You have to adapt to survive. Yeah. And so how do we get a handle on all of this?
And now it comes down to, I think you made what I call a primary point there. Now that we can see this, we can see these guardrails that are really defining how we came to be as well as how we will be. That we have to find ways for healthy competition. And I think that's one of the best things of multi-international trade has done. It's allowed competition and innovation to happen without us killing each other. And right now, of course, the planet is on the edge of keeping it that way through the rule and order of law and order. Or does war break out and nobody obeys any of the rules? And does that become, again, the driving of evolution? What has to happen is we're back to stories. Okay, because stories are the way we inculcate. We take these 3 rules and we allow them a life inside our souls, if you will. There has to be stories of that we're all on the same team. That if we have to have an enemy, we can see it narratively as the changes that are occurring and us having to adapt to them, and that's the real battle, and that the changes are not the ones that are caused by us, at least the traumatic ones as a species, which I think climate change is showing. It's like, yeah, we can do this. We can mess it up. We can have that big of an effect on it. And the other one is the word dominion. Humans were given dominion over the earth, and that word is so often seen as controller. And I think it's the difference between Freud and Jung. Freud saw the ego as the executor of the self, and Jung saw the ego as the convener of the self. And that's it's a difference between a leader and a boss, if you will. Once we see that dominion has to do with caretaking, it has to do with a gardener has dominion over their garden. And that's a great metaphor to me of a narrative that has to happen is human beings as gardeners, as those who now see it. We see how we can pour chemicals and stuff into the water and the air. We see how we can also, there's probably some kind of plant or fungus that will eat every bad thing we've done. These little roly-poly bugs, it turns out, they're eating stuff in the soil that is, like cadmium and stuff that is so toxic to human beings, and they're just processing it because that's what their lives do. And we're learning this. We're learning how the pieces fit together. So Marianne, I think you, again, a primary point, how do we create healthy competition, and how do we take these 3 rules and somehow weave them into our spiritual imperatives, if that makes sense?
Yeah, and then the idea that humans have dominion over the earth, I agree with what you were saying about being caretakers. But to me, that is just the epitome of hubris, because I think it's the other way around. I think the earth has dominion over us. I think that we are more dependent on the earth than the earth is on us. And I think that our common enemies, who we need to fight, what we need to compete, is against sickness, against poverty, against human suffering. And if we can come together and have that be, and care of the planet and care of what we do, and let's compete over who can have the best water desalinator, right? Or those are the kind of competitions. And the other thing about competition is you can't have competition without cooperation. And so, using a sports team metaphor, that team has to work together and cooperate in order to compete. And I think that if we can learn how to cooperate as a species and then tackle some of these big things, I think we will be better off.
Yeah. And I want us to understand, in my narrative, I am the earth. So when I say dominion, there's no over and under. There's care or not care. The word dominion has been greatly mishandled. And I want to be very clear. It's not us over the earth. It's us caring for the earth and the earth's name. And if we can't make that connection that we are the earth caring for herself, that we are now doing what nature has always done, but now we have an intentional role in it, that puts puts an onus of responsibility on us that no species has ever borne before. And it also, not just that, but, and I said it in the beginning of my opening, we are the most powerful predator that the earth has ever produced. And in the last episode of Life on Our Planet, I'm not going to say what it is, but it's heartbreaking, because we are at a crossroads. Can we cause the sixth extinction? And it becomes an existential question for us, and it becomes a question of intentionality. It's not like the whole thing, we serve the earth. We have to serve, what is and what is real. And we now have a sense of what that is. The Industrial Revolution, we didn't know burning that coal and pouring all that crap into the air was going to have such an effect. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. In your introduction, you mentioned that consciousness has reached the point where self-awareness occurs. But I think we're still evolving in terms of our self-awareness. We hear the term unintended consequences. That's a fairly recent development in our consciousness, because in the past, we may have been aware of what we were doing, and we may have been aware that our actions had certain consequences, but now we see that those consequences go far, far beyond what we could have even imagined a few years ago. And it's not just that we are aware of ourselves, and it's not just that we are aware of being a part of what's going on the planet, but we have to be more aware of all of the consequences we have. We can't act blindly anymore. I think this is what Marianne was getting at. We have to stop and take a step back before we act. Make sure that we have at least some rudimentary understanding of what all the unintended consequences of those actions are going to be. Something just occurred to me, it's not just a few years ago when, during the Obama presidency, one of the big issues was Obama using drones to attack terrorists. Now suddenly, 10 years later, the terrorists are using drones to attack us.
Yeah.
So nobody mentioned that 10 years ago, but suddenly now we're completely we're enmeshed in all of these unintended consequences. So being aware is just the first step. being aware of what our awareness leads to. And I think that's really what the deep end is all about.
And it's also, I think, going to be one of the positive things that comes out of AI, because there's too many pieces for humans to keep track of within the whole thing. And we can build an analog model, and AI can pick it up from there and start helping us see what the pieces are. And yeah, there's a lot of insidious pieces, but a couple things. Both of you all use the word intentional. We are now the earth doing what it does intentionally. Are we messing up? Absolutely. Our competition, it's driving innovation, but it's also creating the ability to destroy ourselves and the very fabric that gives rise to us. But that's a new understanding as well. Like you said, Bob, these new understandings are emerging. I was a counselor at a wilderness school called New Dominion, and it was basically for emotionally disturbed kids. And what it was about, Dominion is in the sense I'm thinking of it, and it had to do with young people taking a new responsibility. How did they do that? We put them out in nature. They had to chop their wood in order to be warm. They had to cook their own food and make up their own menus and everything every day. They had to earn the right to go to school. It was learning what nature, it was called reality therapy, what nature has for us, and then work with that. And nature's pretty brutal. You know, when it gets cold, it's cold. And I think that this is what the human species is waking up to right now. And it's not comfortable, because it's a lot of work to be responsible. You can't just have your head in a book and think because you intellectually understand something that's going to have an effect. You have to be part of it. You have to place yourself somewhere that's going to touch the world, even if it's in a little way. And I ask all our listeners to do that. We had a couple listeners in the Ukraine this week. What the heck are they doing listening to us? I'd love to hear from somebody from the Ukraine. Had a couple in Russia. I'd love to hear from somebody from Russia. Over 20 countries, people have listened to us. I would love to hear from some of you. So redhawkthedeepend at gmail.com. That's redhawkthedeepend at gmail.com. Let me know where you are. Let me know what you see in the show. I have to assume some people are just listening to it to work on their English. But, that's my own, what do you call it, putting myself down, I guess. I want us to see that there is a new spirituality on the rise. I not just believe this, but I can feel it. And it is an awareness that seeks to be more responsible, and an awareness that seeks to hardwire our spirituality into the fabric of the world in such a way that the world seeks to reach for what we're reaching for. And I think that comes from stories and narratives and all kinds of stuff. So the three rules: adaptability, competition feeds evolution, and the earth is always changing. Those three, human consciousness must now somehow find our way through to something new that I, again, am convinced is trying to happen. It's trying to happen. But there are forces, we can feel them. Freud used to call them, I don't remember what Freud used to call them, but basically a backlash. We're in the middle of a huge backlash of our step forward, because the step forward, new responsibilities, a little less security because the world is not as we think it is, and it's calling us to become something new. And those are very frightening. They're very demanding. And yet, I think it's really the only game in town, in my own view. So, evolution, competition, earth changing. Marianne, what are your final comments on this?
I think all three of those things, when we're talking about these on a species level, a global level, but I think they're also on an individual level. Those are all three of those things are happening to us individually. And if we can be aware of that and intentionally cultivate that with those small steps, with the few things that we may be able to do in our own little patch of earth. And if that's the best or the only thing that we can do, that's going to be immensely helpful, because I truly believe we have to work on ourselves. And as each person works on themselves and learns these things, these ways to adapt, ways to compete without destroying, and also accepting that everything is going to change, I think that's how we're going to move forward.
And you said something that I wish we had spent more time on, and that's the personal piece. I think that is huge. When I think of competition, when my ideas are challenged, that's the competition I like, right there. I like to do something new. My wife and I are taking Spanish because of exactly that. The challenge. I'm in competition with something in the world. I want to break through. And I think we all have something of that in us. So, amen for that. And I think applying them to our personal life, that's huge. So, the 3 rules, think how they apply to you in your personal life. Bob, final comments?
Well, I always appreciate Marianne pulling it back to the personal. It's so easy for me to get into these intellectual things. That's my nature. But getting pulled back down to earth and to what's really important is really where we should all be focusing. But I think we need to look at these guide rails, as you put it a few minutes ago. How do we take the traditional guidelines and guide rails and help adapt them to the necessities of the modern life? And how do we get beyond just platitudes and make them part of everything we do? Make it a natural way of thinking about things, and a natural way of acting is to move within these guidelines that are going to help us be more cooperative even while we're competing. And I think that's the challenge that we have to meet to avoid this next big disaster that may be looming.
Yeah, amen. And it really is, we're on the edge of a global conflict. And we've talked a lot about different stuff today. And one of the things I want to go to for our next podcast is spiritual evolution. Now, I've pitched this book, Spiritual Evolution, by George Valent, who is a doctor, psychiatrist, who has run the Center for Adult Development at Harvard for 35 years. And we have to do something. Our spirituality has to be grounded in something other than affirmations and beliefs and, some of the stuff Bob was just talking about that we get hung up in. I think we need to find a way of rooting it in something. And I think evolution and our spiritual journey, they have a neurological side. And we're starting to understand that neurological side. We're starting to see that all the religions and all the spiritualities and all of that, they are expressions of something that's inherent in the human being. They're expressions. And of course they get institutionalized and they fall short. So how do we lay hold in a scientific and also intuitive way of spirituality? We're going to go to spiritual evolution. Until then, my friends, many blessings, and may all of you understand that you're now intentionally involved. Evolution, competition, and the changing earth. Be well.